to this District Planning Committee meeting this evening, Wednesday the 5th of August. My name is Councillor Mark Hurd, Chairman of the Malden District Planning Committee. The set-up of this meeting has been designed to mitigate for COVID, and we have asked members to work to the protocols agreed at the Council meeting on the 29th of April 2021 in the interests of member and officer safety. Now, I understand this meeting is to be live streamed. We may be having some technical difficulties, but it will be available tomorrow. So I do welcome any viewers present. It will be recorded, and by being present at the meeting, you are giving consent to also being recorded. Members and officers, during each item, please raise your hand or hold up the white card on the desk in front of you to indicate if you wish to speak, and I will then invite you at the appropriate time. I encourage all members to keep contributions clear and concise, and when invited to speak, please remain seated. When speaking and referring to the agenda papers, please ensure you reference a page or paragraph number. I've also been asked to remind you that we have a roving mic which will come to you. Please do not speak until the mic arrives. Thank you very much. I'll move on now to agenda item 2. Apologies for absence, please, Tara.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies to receive from Councillor Baxendro, Councillor Boyce, Councillor Jurek, Councillor Jarvis, Councillor Doran.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 3 is minutes of the last meeting. This is found on pages 7 to 16, and it's recommended that the minutes of the meeting of the District Planning Committee, which was held on the 9th of June 2021, found on pages 7 to 13, are approved as a true and accurate record. They're presented for accuracy only. I so move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mays. Thank you very much. Members, can we agree these by assent, please? Thank you very much. We have other apologies. Councillor Bell as well. Thank you very much. That's recorded. Agenda item 4 is declarations of interest. This is to disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests, other pecuniary interests or non-pecuniary interests relating to items of business on the agenda, having regard to paragraphs 6 to 8 inclusive of the Code of Conduct for members. And members are reminded that they are required to disclose any such interests as soon as they become aware, should the need arise throughout the meeting. Do I have any declarations? Councillor Stamp.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just that I'm a member of Essex County Council who are consultees on planning applications.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fleming. Okay, I'm not sure if we picked that up. That's non-pecuniary as a member of Essex County Council.
Mine's not pecuniary.
And non-pecuniary for Councillor Stamp. Any other declarations, please? No, thank you very much. I move on then to agenda item 5, which is 21-00479 FUL. This is location being the land north of Marsh Road, Burnham-on-Crouch. This is found on pages 15 to 50 and also on the members' update, pages 3 to 8. I think the officer is Miss Matthews, so could I ask you, please, Miss Matthews, to present the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. So this is an application on land at Marsh Road in Burnham-on-Crouch. And before I start, the Chairman has already made reference to the update which has been previously circulated, but I do have some further verbal updates. One is that I have heard back now from Essex County Council SUDS team. They still require some additional information, but there is a condition recommended which would cover that issue. Essex County Council Highways have raised no objection, and they have asked for conditions to be imposed, and they're saying that the financial contribution required as part of the previous application is still necessary, so there would need to be amendments to the recommendation to make sure that all those conditions and the financial contribution is secured if it's still necessary. Also heard back from the waste team, and they've made some comments and recommendations in terms of waste storage and collection. The application does have a refuse strategy submitted with it. It was received very late in the day, so I haven't had a chance to look through all the details, but from what I've seen, it is either already covered in the information submitted, or it could easily be dealt with by condition if the application was approved. So this is an application for residential development comprising 58 residential dwellings, public open space, landscaping and associated infrastructure. And it is a revised application to one that was approved at the end of last year, and the result would be that there will be 15 additional dwellings on the site as a whole, and there will be with associated revision to the dwelling mix and alterations to the layout. So this site is one of the allocated sites in Burnham, known as S2K, which is located north of Marsh Road, east of St Mary's Church and west of the railway line. The site is allocated for a minimum of 90 dwellings within the local development plan, and as I said before, planning permission has already been granted for 90 dwellings on this site. There's mainly residential development to the south. There's also a school, public footpath along the western boundary, beyond which there are residential properties fronting Marsh Road, and there's also a residential property sandwiched between part of the southern boundary of the site and Marsh Road. The applicant has provided this overlay to try and illustrate the changes to the approved scheme. So the current proposal is in green, and it's been overlaid with the red, which is the previous application permission. So I've got a slightly larger version of the side of the site that is affected by this, in particular this application. So the main changes are, perhaps worth pointing out, is this green block here, which is an extra block of flats in this corner. These dwellings have been pushed over to the west to make space for additional properties, and these properties here have been moved over slightly. There are other smaller changes, but they're the main ones maybe to note. And this is a layout, and it shows where the affordable housing units would be, and they're the ones with the red asterisks. And this is just a coloured layout. It's the same layout, but just in colour, and perhaps a bit clearer to show where how the properties would be laid out. So just to clarify, we've got the red line there around the edge, which is the original application site, and then we've got the 4 areas sort of shaded and outlined in blue, and they're the elements of the previous permission that will remain unchanged. We've got some street scenes that illustrate what the site would look like. So we've got AA across the top, which is, this is the key here showing where that AA street scene would be, and then BB down this side here. And look, at the end of this BB, there is the extra block of flats referred to. We've also got street scenes of C and C, and also D to D. Some examples of the market housing proposed. They're very similar to the properties that have already been approved. So again, fairly standard house types. And then we've got some of the affordable housing. So these are the flatted blocks. So that's one of the blocks. And then you've got the second block. Both blocks would have 6 flats in each. And this is just an example of the affordable housing, which will be houses, not flats. And these are some photos that things have probably moved on slightly because they were taken a few weeks ago. but it just illustrates that the site is a building site and construction of the approved scheme has already commenced. So in conclusion, the proposed development is located within one of the strategically allocated sites in Burnham and complies with the designated requirement that the site is developed for a minimum of 90 dwellings. Furthermore, sufficient provision for infrastructure, services and facilities will be made as part of the development to meet the requirements of the relevant local development plan policies, and therefore officers feel that the principle of the development is acceptable. The development is considered to provide suitable provision of affordable housing and housing mix. The development would neither be harmful to the character and appearance of the area or the site, and nor would it be harmful to the amenities of the neighbouring occupiers, or certainly no more so than the originally approved scheme. It would also make adequate provision for off-street parking and would not have an adverse impact on nature conservation. The tilted balance is engaged currently due to the lack of a 5-year housing land supply, and the development is considered to be sustainable as set out in the MPPF, as the development would not cause any material harm. The main benefits of the proposal are considered to be the social benefits associated with the contribution the development would make to the council's housing land supply. And at a time when the supply is significantly below the 5-year minimum required, there would also be some economic benefits. Therefore, subject to conditions recommended, in addition to those referred to in the updates, and the Section 106 agreement, the development would be acceptable and in accordance with the development plan for the area, and is recommended for approval on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Matthews. Now, we have one public participant for this planning application in line with the public participation scheme. I will now invite the agent, Mr Milne from Savills, to read out his submission. I remind you that you are allocated 2 minutes only for public speaking in accordance with the scheme. Thank you, Mr Milne.
Members, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak in support of the application. My name is Oliver Milne from Savills, who are Taylor Wimpey's planning consultant on this project. Firstly, we'd like to thank officers for their report and their positive recommendation, which we fully support. As you have heard, Taylor Wimpey has identified an opportunity to increase the number of 1 and 2 bedroom homes at the site, which directly responds to an identified local need and demand. As a result of this, the total number of new homes to be delivered across the site will increase by 15, with a corresponding uplift in affordable housing. It is in this context I would like to cover a few points. At the heart of both national and local planning policy and guidance is a presumption in favour of sustainable development. Coupled with this is a directive for the effective use of land in meeting the need for new homes. The site is a sustainable, accessible and allocated site which, in the context of the council being unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, has the potential to further contribute to the district supply. In terms of the quality of the new homes, all have been designed to accord with relevant policy standards and requirements with no signs of overdevelopment. All of the homes are NDSS compliant, a dual aspect and have policy compliant levels of private amenity space, car parking and cycle parking. All of the new homes will be of a high quality for future residents. In terms of any extra demand and impact created by additional residents, the development already includes public open space well in excess of the policy requirement, whilst an uplift in the relevant financial contributions will be secured as part of the legal agreement. The proposals have been thoroughly tested and we are pleased that officers of the Council have endorsed our assessments, leading to a positive and well-balanced officer report with a recommendation for approval, with officers concluding that the development would not cause any material harm. Given all of this, we respectfully request that the application be approved in accordance with your officer's recommendation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr Milne. Members, I'm now going to open the debate and I'm going to invite you to put any questions or make any comments that you have on the report. So, I have a number of hands. First hand up, if you just hold on to them, I've got Councillor Nunn, Edwards, Councillor Schemes, Councillor Channer,
Sue White.
Sue White, Kevin Leggett.
Yeah, you've got Councillor Channer.
Okay, I think I've got all those. Councillor Nunn first.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. And thank you, Ms Matthews and also Mr Milne for your presentations. There are a number of things that are confusing me about this application. First of all, the number. Are we really talking about an additional 15 on the previous approved number, or are we talking about 58, or are we talking about 73? So is this application simply to add another 15 units? That's the first question. The second thing is I'm a bit troubled that we've, on top of the member update that we've got already, there's some additional information which hasn't been properly analysed yet, by the sounds of it, that can be addressed through conditions. Well, if we don't know what the detail is, how can we look at the conditions? And there are also some consultees that require additional information from us, by the sounds of it. So those things are troubling me a bit, and I think I value some clarification. I'd also like to go back to the site plan to just be totally clear how close these additional buildings will be to the church. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dunn. Mr Lee. Oh no, Miss Matthews.
Thank you, Chairman. In terms of the numbers, the whole site, that's the big site there outlined in red, that has planning permission for 90 dwellings. This area here has permission for, get it right, 43 dwellings. They now want planning permission for 58 dwellings, so that's an additional 15. And that would take the total for the whole site up to 105. Does that answer your question about numbers?
Yes, it's a lot clearer when you put it that way.
Okay, fine.
So it's an additional 15 units on a previously approved 43.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you. That's clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll move now
Sorry,
to...
any other points? Thank you.
Apologies for the lateness of some of the updates, but I have literally only just received emails from Highways, and so despite having asked them, and they promised that they'd be with me by yesterday, but officers are confident that the issues that they've raised are new issues or issues that haven't been already covered and addressed in the report that's before you. Subs do need additional information, but it's technical information, and this is a site that's already got plan permission, has already got approval for the drainage, so we're only looking at an extra 15 properties on there, so that I'm sure the developer will be able to address it, and there is a condition recommended to make sure that extra information comes in and is approved for the development gets underway. And in terms of how close to the church, I think the church is open here, right? So this is the second site and the chambers to the site where to the eastern side of it. So I don't know the exact distance away, but
Okay, I'll leave it for now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Nunn. Councillor Edwards, next door.
Thank you, Chairman.
Can I draw your attention to 5.72, page 26, where it says the housing manager has advised that the proposal would meet the 40% affordable housing requirement. And then can I move you on to
Page 39, 7.3, where it says the applicant is meeting the 40% affordable requirement. However, the affordable housing mix as proposed does not comply with the results of the 2021 local housing needs assessment. So I'm a bit confused where it says on one it doesn't apply and on the other it does. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Matthews.
yes, through your Chairman, the situation is the application came in April, at which time the local needs housing assessment was not produced, and that's only been published very recently in the last 3 weeks or so. So the application was submitted on the basis of the SHMAR 2014 which was what we were using before. So from a housing manager's point of view, he felt that he needed to state that it doesn't comply with the local housing needs assessment, but because this is an application to change what has already been approved, the local housing needs assessment came out very recently. As officers, we felt that it would be unreasonable now to impose the local needs housing assessment on this particular scheme, but certainly moving forward, any applications received since the housing needs assessment has been published will certainly be expected to fully comply with the housing mix there. And the other point I was going to make is that the only difference between what they're proposing and what the local housing needs assessment would ideally ask for would be one 4-bedroom house instead of one of the smaller units. So the difference is fairly small in any event, even if even taking into account the more recent housing needs assessment. Thank you.
Can I come back? Thank you for that response. The only reason I picked up on it was because it did say that it doesn't comply, and I just picked up on that bit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see you indicating, Councillor Hull. I've got your name down. Thank you. Councillor Schemes is next.
Yes, I have concerns about things that don't comply. If it doesn't comply, it doesn't comply, and there's no reason why it can't be submitted again if it doesn't comply. Could you also, I'm sorry, I'm getting confused, still confused about the figures. The total for the plot is how many, 90 what, that have been approved?
90 have been approved.
90 have been approved. And we're having another 15 on top of that. Okay. My concern, is that Burnham is already massive, is overloaded. There's a big public concern about it being overloaded, that we don't have the infrastructure, and indeed there's a part in the in the local development plan which talks about that if we exceed numbers put out in our local plan, then we need to ensure that infrastructure is put in place first. I'm very concerned about more houses going onto this site. And also what I cannot understand and I would love an explanation from somebody, is how it can be that we go through the process of approving a certain number of houses, and then suddenly, they found room for more, as if they couldn't have known that before. I find that very difficult to deal with. I mean, and it makes, frankly, it makes the public feel cynical about it. They feel, look, you know, the developers have said this and now they're adding this on, and that does not, I don't think that's good reputationally. So I do have concerns. I'm obviously listening to the debate, but I am worried about this increase in the number of houses. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Schemes. Councillor Channer.
She's there.
At the back, yeah, at the back, Shane, thank you. No, that's it.
You passed it on.
There we are.
I better keep my mask on. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm a little bit confused in the figures regarding the parking. Maybe I've read it wrong, but it seems to me there's some extra spaces coming. Could that be visitor parking? Have I read the report incorrectly? And also, I've read that the orchard's going to be reduced. Really what I want to know is, obviously, if you're putting 15 houses on, something's going to be taken away. Now, it looked to me like it was the orchard's going to have a deficit of over 500 square metres, and there was something else referred to in terms of public open space. And I understand there'll be another block of flats, so I suppose that might form part of the element. The other area which is concerning me is the 106 agreement, in which it appears to me there's been one, I'm assuming, agreed when the 90 were approved in terms of heads of terms, and now I'm reading about there could be some jiggery-pokey, because that's my wording, not necessarily yours, which may alter the figures of that heads of term. Am I correct or am I wrong? And I'm just interested to know why perhaps that sort of information could not be at this committee tonight, so we're very, very clear what the heads of terms should actually be, should this be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms Matthews, I've got 3 questions. Parking, what's been taken away in the heads of term?
In terms of the parking, I think I think I would just say that all the properties proposed have sufficient parking to comply with the adopted standards. So that's 2 spaces for 2 and 3 beds, and 3 spaces for 4 beds plus, and 1 space for 1 beds, and plus the visitor spacing parking spaces, which is 1 per 4 parking spaces. So the numbers are set out in the report, but the scheme is fully compliant with the current adopted standards in terms of the number of spaces and also their size. And in terms of the loss of public open space, obviously there has need to be made some space for the extra units. So you're correct in saying that an area of the orchard down here in the south eastern corner would be eaten into slightly by the block of flats, and there was also going to be a slightly bigger area of open space. I don't know whether it would be public or private, but in terms of sort of landscaping, there would be a loss in that area there. But my pointer is they're the main 2 changes. But in terms of public open space, there's a very, very extensive area all across the top of the site, and also there's the play area along the western boundary, and most of the orchard would be retained as well. In terms of the section 106, the uncertainty is associated with the fact that this is forms part of a site that's already got planning permission, and it's extra units on top of what's been approved. So the only uncertainty is to make sure that developer isn't paying twice, so that any contributions that were triggered as part of the existing 106 on the 90 units, they don't have to pay again for the same units that are being replaced basically by this scheme. So that's, I think that's what you were getting at or asking about, if my understanding is correct.
Chairman, yes. May I come back with it?
Yes.
Yes, you're correct, Ms Matthews. But to me, if you're getting 15 additional houses or properties, whatever form they are, to me, you're saying the developer shouldn't pay twice, but we've just heard tonight these are additional to the 90 already agreed. We're going up to 105. So therefore, to me, surely there should be more monies accruing under the 106. Where would the developer be paying twice? Are you talking on the access road or something, or elements of that? But surely, if we're talking about additional 15 dwellings, that must actually have an increase somewhere within the 106 agreements that should be formulated and agreed under the 106 agreement. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, because I'm not an expert on this.
Now, there certainly would be additional contributions required, both for education and NHS. I can't remember if there's another one off the top of my head, but all the financial contributions that were required by the original scheme, with the 15 extra units, certainly for the education and NHS, there will be an additional payment to make. I think one of the issues is the consultation responses are based on 58 houses proposed, and not the extra 15. So I think there has been perhaps some double counting going on, and they're being treated as separate applications when in fact it's an amendment to something that's already existing. So, but in answer to the question, yes, there would be extra financial contributions, but they will, for this application, they would need to be linked in some way, and I'm going to leave it to the legal solicitors to work out how to do it, so that if Taylor Wimpey paid for the financial contribution for the 90 units, they wouldn't have to pay again for the whole of this scheme. They'd only have to pay for the extra 15. Have I explained it well enough?
Yes, I think so. I'd quite like to know the figures tonight. I guess that's where I'm coming from, really.
I think the extra 15 is for a second block. Am I right?
And the extra 15 consists partly of an extra block of flats, for that which would be 6, but there would also be extra units in the number of houses as well.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's my understanding.
Okay. All right. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Councillor Lagan next.
Thanks, Chair. I too also had a bit of a difficult time understanding the figures that are actually presented in the report, because I won't go over what the other members have said, but we started off talking about 15 dwellings with additional 58 with additional 15, and then we got confused with the car parking in sections 3.13 was talking about 203 spaces for units, so I got myself in a right tiz-was straight from the get-go. But you've confirmed that the amendments are going to be eaten into the orchard. Is that correct?
That's the main area where they've made extra space.
Okay, thank you for that.
And I think in terms of the scheme as a whole, that's the
Yeah, no,
biggest
all I'm
change.
interested in is what it actually eats into, or what was promised to be delivered on the initial application, Ms Matthews. Thank you. Another concern in the report was section 3.1.17. It talks about the supporting documents that were being resubmitted. Obviously, they're many in their nature, but they talk about being resubmitted, but they don't talk about the documents that were resubmitted, the amendments that actually spoke to this proposed change. Also, we talked about on page 19, section 3.2.1, and we've covered it already about the minimum delivery for 90 dwellings in number. Well, if the LPA decides that they only want 90, then 90 it should be. Why should we accept another 15? If we don't have another set 15, we don't need additional funding, we don't have additional burden on the services that are already stretched at the time. Another concern I have is about section 4.1. It talks in the report about members' attention is drawn to a list of background papers attached to this agenda. There were no background papers attached to the agenda, so I'm trying to be a better member in the decision-making process, and it talked of 43 attachments, so I feel I'm not fully au fait to be able to make a determination without the levels of detail. In the subsections 5.2.3, it talks of maintaining green spaces and the loss of an orchard, no matter how small, and the loss of green spaces, again with the greening of the district to do with the Essex strategy and our own commitments, and the risk of flooding, because it's in a level 2-3 flood zone, I believe. When it's just been declared that the world's flooding worse than it ever has, that also concerns me. Yes, we may be able to mitigate it, but I just want to raise that concern. And it talks about nature conservation in 5.16.1 on page 32. Talks about open spaces should be protected. Again, the orchard area is quite a lovely open space, and I felt that should be protected. And I think Councillor Edwards mentioned that there's also areas that have been noted within the report where we haven't had feedback. And I think, again, maybe being time pressed on situations like this, for maybe a KPI, I don't know, we should really have all of the information in place. And my last concern really doesn't need opening is when it refers dramatically in the report about the National Planning Policy Framework Section 7. You know, it does talk about environmental objectives, you know, mitigating and adapting to climate change and low carbon. The more you build, the more challenge you're going to have to actually fulfil that requirement. So they're just concerns that I have, but you've answered my main question, Ms Matthews, which is it does eat into the orchard, of which I'm grateful for. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lagan. I'm going now to Councillor Sue White, just at the back, Shane there. Keep going round. Yeah.
This gentleman here. Pass the parcel, musical chairs.
Thanks, James.
Thank you for permitting me to speak, Mr Chairman. On page 37, Essex County Council has a holding objection to the Essex surface water flooding. I've got problems that in 3.1.2, part of the site is in flood zones 2 and 3, and we should not be building anywhere on 3, and 2 is doubtful. And any small application has to have a flood report done and finished before putting the application in, and they say that additional housing will cause an additional strain. So why are we allowing the big developers to come in with these applications with incomplete information? I'm sorry, I just don't accept that as being acceptable. You know, that should have been done prior. The other thing is with the 5.1.6 and also on page 37, Natural England require a habitat regulation assessment. Well, that's fine. But I can't see anywhere in the paperwork that there's a net gain, because there should be a net gain. It shouldn't just be about finances, and I can't see any net gain. And the thing is, the previous application would have had, presumably, I would hope the officers had a net benefit of a certain percentage. This is all required under the new legislation for habitat assessments that Natural England have published in the last 2 months. And that I cannot see. So what is the percentage of habitat improvement in line with Natural England's current guidance? What was the previous assessment with the percentage? And how much has it reduced? And doing £127 for the RAMS agreement does not cover the habitat. Orchards have a very high habitat value, so where are you getting the habitat replacement from? Because I can't see it, Natural England require it, so unless I've missed it, could the officers confirm? And the other thing is, with the previous, in other parts of this application, we were promised a bridleway. I do ride horses, but not in Burnham, so it's a slight interest there. Where is our bridleway? I can see nothing. I can't see footpaths. I can't see anything at all. And that's in our LDP, and it's in our planning policies that we're going to create bridleways. And as I say, the orchard, we could theoretically have had a bridle path in, but it's been removed. And I'm really concerned that it doesn't appear, unless I'm mistaken, that we do not have the increase in habitat that Natural England now require. So where is it and how much is it? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor White. Ms Matthews, quite a few questions there. I've noted most of those. Have you able to answer them, please?
Yes, I'll try as best I can. In terms of flood risks 2 and 3, the only parts of the site which are at risk of flooding are these areas at the top where no houses are being proposed and no buildings being proposed, and that flood risk is associated with the brook that runs along the northern boundary. So in terms of any of the new occupiers being at risk of flooding, then that isn't an issue. The application was supported by a flood risk assessment, which is the same one as the first application, but in terms of SUDs, they're looking at perhaps more technical issues and in particular surface water drainage, and their aim is to ensure that the surface water runoff from the site is no greater than it is currently, and it was obviously a greenfield site, so now the runoff rates will be at greenfield levels. But whilst they're saying that they need some more information, they're not saying that this development can't be done satisfactorily. They're just saying the developer needs to demonstrate how they're going to do it. So if the runoff is too great, then there'd have to be some on-site storage of the runoff so that it could then be released more slowly and maintain that greenfield rate. So, and there's lots of technical ways of doing that. Some are more expensive than others, but that's a requirement, and there will be a way of doing it. It's just a matter of the developer coming up with the solution that says they're happy with. And the condition that's recommended will ensure that process, that discussion that has been ongoing will continue until a solution is found. And if a solution can't be found, then the condition won't be discharged and development won't be able to lawfully go ahead. So there's that control, if you like, and hopefully that gives members some peace of mind that that issue will be sorted out, and there's no reason to be concerned that SIDS haven't been able to withdraw their objection as of today. So in terms of why we're accepting applications with insufficient information, there is the list of documents that an application needs to come in with, the validation list, and this application, all the documents required by that list was submitted. Very often it can be that the documents that come in aren't sufficient and then that there aren't enough details in them. But in terms of being able to sort of turn an application away on the basis of the documents not being there, that this wasn't possible in this case because all the documents required were there, and the flood risk assessment has previously been accepted and as being satisfactory. In terms of the HRA and under the habitats regulations, that is there is a small section in the report which talks about stage 1 and stage 2 of that process. So that has been gone through, and officers are satisfied that the application, the proposal would be acceptable from the HRA process. In terms of net gain, Essex County Council Ecology have been consulted on the application, and they recommend a condition is imposed to require ecological mitigation measures and also ecological enhancements as set out in the ecological impact assessment which came in with the application. I don't know the percentage that would be, but there is provision there for enhancements, and our expert advisors on those issues have advised that the application is satisfactory, and that the imposition of that condition would address any would satisfy that requirement for net gain. There is no bridle way through this site, but in terms of footpaths and footpath links with the surrounding areas and also within the site, they are exactly the same as what was approved as part of the previous application. As I mentioned earlier, there's a public footpath which runs along the western boundary of the site that would be retained, and that remains the same as previously approved. So in that respect, no concerns were raised in terms of the provision for public footpaths or public rights way or pedestrian access within the site and connections with its surroundings. Sorry, going a bit croaky. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hull next.
Thank you. Living there, it's already really hard to get to the doctors. The schools are all overflow, can't get a place at the schools. The roads aren't able to cope. And as for the bridleways, we were promised a bridleway. You've got one of the largest riding schools in the area. We've got no bridleways in Burnham. It was definitely promised when we put the application in. Once again, you have builders coming along and changing their mind at the last minute. It's not fair on people that live there. All the time this happens. We just don't get what we're promised in the beginning.
All right, thank you. I don't think there was a question in there, more of a statement. Thank you. Councillor Swain, just second one along here, Shane. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this is a significant increase in numbers of housing for this particular area, and it seems to be basically at the expense of orchard and green space and community areas. Perhaps also at the expense of some amenity for individual properties. And in that connection, I note in 3114 there was mention about the size of gardens for the private two-bed houses. No mention of whether the affordable ones get a similar size of garden, which I would certainly hope. But on the question of SUDs and so on, I assume that there will be accepted agreement from Essex. Otherwise, presumably, the application would fail. But my concern with things like SUDs and the blue spaces, the green spaces, and probably quite a lot of the roadways, if they're not adopted, is how they will be managed and how the performance of can be gauged and kept up to scratch in maintaining the SUDs and the green spaces. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Ms Matthews, could we just confirm, it says in 314, all the private garden areas would measure at least 50 square metres for the two-bedroomed houses. Do we, all we've got is the communal area of the amenity space. So do we have the amenity area for the new block?
Yes, Chairman, yes, so both the blocks would be provided with sufficient communal area to comply with the design guide. That private reference in the report is to private gardens and not the private houses. So that means that both the private and the affordable houses all have private amenity spaces. Perhaps I'll say it differently. The affordable houses and the market housing all have private amenity space which complies with the design guide minimums. So I think that answers Councillor Swain's question about that. In terms of management, the public open space and the SUDS, that would be through a management company in a very similar way to most new developments that come forward, and that's all managed and controlled through the Section 106 agreement. So one would have been required as part of the existing permission for the 90 dwellings, and that would be followed through with any 106 agreement associated with this revised scheme. Thank you.
Right, so there will be a SUDS agreement. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Stilts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've read through this document. Seeing as this council has now declared a climate emergency statement, I'm just looking through this, and can you tell me how many of these new dwellings will have solar panels, how many will have electric charging points for the cars, and how many will have recyclable water, grey water tanks, and also heat exchange conversion pumps?
Thank you very much. Solar panels, electric charging points, heat exchangers and water.
Grey water, recycled.
Yeah, grey water, thank you.
There has been no reference to those measures or features that you refer to as part of the application. The main issue, as far as officers are concerned at the moment, is that there's no policy within the current adopted local development plan to require these measures to be introduced. I'm sure that is something that will be worked on and included in the revised local plan, which is in the process of being that process has started, but it's certainly not a requirement that we can ask for, but can't require, and it's not something that the application could be refused for because of the lack of the policy support. So that would make such a refusal liable to not being successful at appeal.
Thank you. Right, members, I know that Councillor Stamp wishes to speak, but yes, Councillor Fleming. Right on the corner, Shane, thank you. Well done.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back to Ms Matthews' last point. I was just looking at conditions, condition 18. It says, furthermore, a fast charging point shall be provided adjacent to at least one parking space for each new dwelling.
Yes, sorry, that in terms of vehicle parking, that is within our current vehicle parking standards. So yes, that is something we can ask for. I was talking about more the solar panels and the recycling water and perhaps some of the other energy efficient and green elements that could have been imposed. So sorry, yes, the electric charging points would be required in line with the current vehicle adopted parking standards.
Mr Lee, you want to speak?
Thank you, Chairman. Just obviously, a couple of members have brought this up, so just thinking for a point of clarity. The council has announced a climate emergency, and obviously that's consideration for the council, but it isn't a consideration of any significant weight in the determination of plan applications, which always start with the local plan, with our adopted planning policies, and and we have to look at what is acknowledged and what is not an acknowledged material consideration. The MPPF is very clear that climate change and the emergency and various positions we have across the different conferences, etc., is very important in the plan making process, but it is silent on the decision making process, and that is our guide for decision makers on how we should be assessing applications. So while we are keen to improve climate change and ecology, etc., and all these other various matters, we only can tie in, and what we can't tie into is what our policies say and what material considerations say, and that is the issue. And I think, as Matthew said, this is maybe something that as an authority we need to look at more robustly through the review of the LDP. But our policies, are what they are at the moment. As Ms Matthew said, in relation to charging points, we can embrace that because that's within our car parking standards. But in relation to lots of the other things, they aren't in our adopted policies, so we unfortunately can't impose them, or it can't form a reason for refusal or a condition or anything like that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Schemes, you've indicated that you just need a quick point then, if you will.
Just a quick point. Clearly, we have a climate emergency. So it strikes me that all new builds need to have all these provisions put in. So I'm calling for this council that we make an agenda point and make the decision at council, rather than waiting for the development of the new LDP, actually make a policy decision that all new builds have to have all the list of requirements as suggested by Councillor Stills, because otherwise we're not treating it like an emergency. Thank you.
Mr Lee, did you want to come back on that?
Chairman, obviously, that would be a decision for council, but obviously, as I'd just advise members that any planning policy needs to go through a very strict process, which includes evidence basing, going through consultation and examination in public. So that wouldn't be a decision that we could give any weight to in the determination of a planning application. Be my advice. Thank you, Chairman.
All right, thank you. I'm going to move to. Sorry, is that? Sorry, Councillor Shaughnessy. Sorry, I couldn't quite see you there, Councillor Shaughnessy.
Thank you, Chairman. Just very briefly, I fully understand what Mr Lee was saying, but I also agree with Councillor Schemes, and I don't think it's necessarily incumbent upon developers to actually kind of bring themselves down to the level of the council to comply. They can do these things off their own back, surely, and will be much more highly thought of because of it. These things need to be raised and not taken down to the base level. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Shaughnessy. Okay, so going back to this application, I'd like to turn now to Councillor Stamp.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I'm actually disappointed with the developer. I thought part of the sale of the lands, specifically, I remember when the sale was going through, the stipulation was the orchard. We've had nothing but trouble regarding the orchard because originally it was put at the side to provide a buffer from the existing houses. That then wasn't allowed, I think, due to pipework, and I know Mr Lee most probably doesn't know about this, but there was a great furore about it. Had long conversations with the applicant and the developer, because they said it couldn't go there because of pipework. So it was moved at the top. I personally didn't want it moving at the top, but there's nothing we could do about it. The council had agreed it, and it actually went and moved to the top. And now what absolutely astounds me is that they know how passionate we are. We're rural, or semi-rural, and you want to get rid of 540 square metres to put another block of flats there. You're supposed to be sort of working within the community and the council as far as I'm concerned, and I actually feel quite affronted that you want to put another 15 houses on a site when you know whether Essex County Council agree that we haven't got any school places. We know for a fact This development is opposite St Mary's. There are no places at St Mary's. Ormiston, there are no places. They're agreeing next year to put 2 form entry in. At the moment, we've got houses and residents in Burnham who cannot walk to their local schools. We're supposed to be doing a climate, exactly what everybody said, a climate emergency strategy, but yet we're putting our children on buses to go out to incorporate more houses being developed within the district. Burnham-on-Crouch has been hammered. We have been front-loaded by the houses, and I think it's a real shame that Taylor Wimpey, who have an excellent record for dealing and providing good houses, are now reducing the size of gardens to cram 15 extra houses in. I do apologise if I'm a little bit blunt, Mr Taylor Wimpey, but I feel very, very strongly about this. I actually feel that policy S2 states quite clearly, members, officers and developer, it says significant infrastructure constraints exist which will strictly limit the capacity of growth in Maldon, Heybridge and Burnham-on-Crouch in excess of that set out in policy S2. Okay? We know we've got excess. We know that our infrastructure is creaking, if not breaking at the seams. And I also want to respond to Councillor White when she said about, and Councillor Hull, policy S6 states quite clearly, safe pedestrian, cycling and bridleway links are provided from the development to the town centre and where applicable to other public services, facilities and existing urban area. We don't obviously meet that at this application either, and I think it's a valid point. In Burnham-on-Crouch we've got excellent riding school. We commemorate and the horse riders go down, and I really don't want horses and people who exercise for health and well-being excluded from new development. And as far as I'm concerned and can see, nearly every new development so far are not being horse friendly. I don't ride a horse, I'd fall off it, even though Councillor Anne Hull has offered to put me on one. I haven't taken you up on that. I also would like to ask a question instead of my normal speech before Mr Lee tells me off, because I always say about the lack of infrastructure, schools, etc. Can you tell me where we have the same size height ridge of 9.7 metres in this area, where the height of these flats are? Because I can't remember any if there is one. Do you want me to stop there? Because I've got a few, it gives me a chance to catch my breath.
Well, you're taking your time on your allotted time, Councillor.
Have I gone over it, have I?
Are you able to come back on any of those, Ms Matthews, at the moment?
Through you, Chairman, in terms of local schools and other infrastructure, if this application is approved, there will be an expectation that a financial contribution as required by the Essex County Council schools education will be required and secured through the 106 agreement. So whilst there might not be capacity now, there is provision for that capacity to be increased for the future and to take into account the extra children who would be living in Burnham. Policy S2 does say about significant infrastructure constraints, including in Burnham, but my understanding is that sentence is in the policy. It was put in the policy at a time when there was going to be significantly more housing development proposed for Burnham than is currently the case in the current local plan. Essex County Council Highways have raised no objections to the proposal, and also you've got reiterating the point that this is for a relatively small number of extra properties on the site, which has already got planning permission for 90. So in terms of extra strain on the infrastructure, that would be fairly minimal in the context of the development as a whole. The policy S6 talks about requirements for bridleways. There isn't a bridleway requirement as part of this development, but this application is to amend and increase the number of dwellings on the site, and therefore it would be unreasonable to make that a requirement of the current application, because that is just for 15 houses. I don't know enough about the original application, not being the case officer, to know whether that issue was ever raised and what came of it. But certainly in respect to the current application, that wouldn't be something that could be required on the back of the extra dwellings that are now proposed. I think that responds to all the points that needed
Okay,
response.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Chairman, can I come back? Because
Well, if I could just give you 30 seconds.
Yeah,
then,
that's
because,
fine. It's a quick
okay.
question. The officer said that the infrastructure restraints was based on a higher figure. I can't see where that says in the LDP. So if it was based on a higher figure, surely that would be in the LDP because that's evidence. You have to evidence-base that statement. And B, what about the height, ridge height? I maybe missed that. I didn't hear you.
Yeah, sorry, Chairman. I didn't write that one down. So in terms of the height, I don't know. To be able to point to a building within the vicinity of the site that I know is a similar height. But if you look at these street scenes here, you've got street scene C, and you've got the flatted blocks at one end and the houses behind them as you go along the eastern boundary of the site. And the height of those flats is slightly greater than the two-storey houses, but by a minor amount, I would suggest. The flats are still two-storey, the same as the houses. If they haven't got room for the roof or anything to add to the height and bulk of the roofs. So all I can say is that the application has been assessed and it was felt that these buildings, in the context of the site as a whole, would not be harmful, even if they are slightly taller than the two-storey houses on the rest of the site. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nunn, I'll let you have a second time again. Just at the front here, Shane, that's it. Thank you.
That's very kind of you, Chair. I don't have a question actually. It's well, I do. It's a view actually.
All right.
So are we at a stage where we're going to vote on the recommendation, or are you up for a proposal?
Well, thank you for that. Then there is an officer's recommendation to approve this. However, if there is a proposal from the floor, I'm prepared to take that. Councillor Nunn.
Yes, so my proposal, and we'd need Mr Lee and Miss Matthews to help us phrase this properly, I'm sure, but I would say that we refuse this application on the grounds of overdevelopment of that previously approved, the loss of orchard green infrastructure, and the lack of promised bridleway. Thank you.
That is duly. That's well, very grateful to everybody. I've got Councillor Mays who has seconded that. So I'm now going to go to the vote. Members, those who are in favour of...
Could we have a recorded vote, Mr Chairman?
That's seconded. Okay, we'll have a recorded vote on this. This is to refuse on the grounds of overdevelopment, loss of green... Mr Lee?
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously it's good practice for me to give a comment on those points. All I would say is always with a reason for refusal, you have to be able to demonstrate harm, and the phrase overdevelopment, as you probably noticed in the officer's reports, very rarely forms part of the reason for refusal because on its own it doesn't demonstrate harm. So you would need to expand on what the overdevelopment meant. It could, for example, if you did see it in an officer's report, it may be that the design wasn't acceptable and the car parking requirement wasn't met and the car parking, for example, was dominant, etc., etc. Those things result or how you can understand what the overdevelopment is, but just the use of the phrase overdevelopment on its own would be very difficult to defend appeal because it's not clear and precise. The loss of the orchard, I think members need... When we're determining planning applications, it's not a popularity contest. It's not a case of saying, I had this application and it's better than this application. So it wouldn't be the loss of the orchard. What it would be is that the proposed orchard is not considered to be of a size or an expanse that is considered to mitigate the harm, or the proposed development results in an urban development which includes, you know, it's evidenced by the reduction in the orchard, etc. I know it sounds semantics, but it's quite important in relation to actually how a reason for refusal should be formed. And in relation to the loss of a bridleway, as Ms Matthews said, I don't think there was that. I don't think everyone has ever been granted. But I think, I don't know if we can double check that before a vote. Just look at the previous application, just for clarity, because I wouldn't want to give any members anything that's not accurate, at least as much as accurate as I can be. Thank you, Chairman.
Can I ask Mr Lee a question, please?
Well, I just want to go to Councillor Nunn first, because you may want to...
So just on the point of clarity, I didn't just say overdevelopment, I said overdevelopment on that previously approved. And it goes hand in hand with my second point, which is about loss of infrastructure, green infrastructure. So I probably have put it rather clumsily, that's why I was asking for some help. But what I'm basically saying is by adding the extra houses, it's eating into part of the green infrastructure. So in that respect, I feel it would be overdevelopment. And on the point of bridleway, we've heard two members here, at least from their memory, say that a bridleway was promised. And if a bridleway was promised, and that was part of the reason that we approved the process in the first place, then the bridleway should be installed.
Councillor Stamp.
Yeah, could I ask Mr Lee, is there a danger that the applicant could still come back and get rid of the rest of the orchard for another few houses because they changed their mind? Or would we be able to put a planning condition that would safeguard that? And trying to help Councillor Nunn, could it not be policy S3, place shaping? Is there nothing there? Because I actually think it is. It's supposed to be harmonious relationship between town and country. And I don't see that site as being harmonious to town and country. It is crammed now to what it originally was going to be. To me, it looks a little bit forced and contrived. Would that not help at all, Mr Lee?
Thank you, Chairman. To be honest, Councillor Nunn's expansion on what you just said was more than acceptable for myself for clarity. It's, as I said, it might seem like semantics, but as officers we can't gift the reason for refusal. But I think, Councillor Nunn's expansion was very helpful and clarity for us to be able to form a, obviously officers wouldn't necessarily agree with it, but a planning-based, sound reason for refusal.
Okay.
And what I'd say in relation to the bridleway, I just think we need to check, because obviously we've got to be conscious that this has got full planning permission, this site, and members' recollection, and even if there may have been a promise that's fallen away, if this example could be built out tomorrow without the bridleway, the current application, that's why we just need to balance that. So I would just want clarity for members before they went to a vote on that point. Thank you, Chairman.
So, Ms Bird, have we got...
Councillor White and Councillor Jones.
Okay, have you got some wording ready as yet? No, not yet. Okay, thank you. Councillor Miss White. Briefly, if you don't mind, please.
Really brief. Just two things. One, to add to the reason for refusal, we could say that the combined issues of the loss of the valuable orchard habitat and the increase in the housing on that area has includes the oh God, I can't think of the wording, I'm tired, has caused an urbanising effect on a rural country area, if we can use words to that effect, I think that covers it. And also, in addition, it doesn't comply with policy S2, which is the public open spaces, because even the orchard was formed as part of the open public space, and that's gone. So I think we need to do it's a joint thing, with one being lost and one being added to, that's removed the benefit and the public space.
Thank you. Councillor Channer, briefly, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Chairman. This might conflict a bit maybe with Councillor Nunn's proposal, but I think the thing that bothers me a bit is that actually the strategic housing manager doesn't support the application because of the mix of the affordable housing. I know we've heard the explanation about the housing needs being relatively new and it would be unreasonable, but bearing in mind the pressures we have within the district in terms of affordable housing and the mix, I just find it a bit strange that here we have a proposal when we've got the strategic housing manager, or specialist housing manager rather, stating it might provide the 40%, etc. It might have the minimum spaces. However, they cannot support because the scheme as the affordable housing mix proposed does not comply with the results of the 2020 LHNA. Thank you.
Right. Right, Councillor Nunn, I'm going to go back to you because this is your proposal.
It is, Chair, and it was seconded, wasn't it?
It was.
I'd be happy to make the amendments based on the comments made by Mr Lee and by Councillor White and Councillor Channer. So I still think that it's overdevelopment that impacts on loss of green infrastructure, and I'm happy to include the comments that Councillor Channer made and Councillor White. I'm thinking about how we can word the bridleway if that was not a condition. But I still think, because of the rural nature, a bridleway should be installed, and there's no indication that it would be. So if my seconder, and I think that was Councillor Mays, would be happy with those changes,
Yes, I am.
subject again, of course, to Mr Lee, we could vote on that, couldn't we, Chair?
Right, okay. I don't want to take any more questions now. I'd like to go to the vote. I think this has been well... yes, I'll come to Mr Lee in a second. I think this has been well debated. I will go finally to Mr Lee. Well, that's what I'm hoping Mr Lee will come up with.
Dear Chairman, yeah, for clarity, so obviously, just want to make sure everybody's aware. So the proposal would be three separate reasons for refusal, one being the proposed development, the volume. I would suggest that members have stated something on the level of development has resulted in a form of development that does not reflect the rural character of the area, and that that would appear to be my understanding of what the debate has been and what Councillor Nunn's sort of highlighted issues were. And obviously, as always, we'll form it up properly through obviously recommend we delegate that to officers and for agreement of the chair. The second one would be to the fact that the proposal does not include the provision of a bridleway, and then the third reason would be in relation to the housing mix not reflecting the local housing needs assessment. Is that correct?
Okay. The loss of green infrastructure.
Yeah, that would be included in the original one that relates to the urban nature of the doesn't reflect the rural.
Before I go to the thank you for that. Before I go, is there anything you want to add to that, Councillor Schemes? I'm
just going to remind everybody this is a beautiful corner of Burnham, lovely ancient church, one of the most beautiful churches in the area, and I don't feel this is fitting, especially with these additions.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. I'm going to go to the vote now, members. This is for Councillor Nunn's proposal to refuse that. It's been duly seconded by Councillor Mays. I've been asked for a recorded vote, so Ms Bird, could I ask you to call the roll, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Members, if you could indicate for, against or abstain when I call your name, please. Starting with Councillor Miss Beale.
This is to refuse the application. To refuse
it. So you're for or against it?
So you're for refusal.
So you're for Councillor Nunn's refusal?
Thank
Yes.
you. Councillor Mrs Channer. You, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Mrs Fleming. Councillor Hurd.
For.
Councillor Hubner. Councillor Hull. Councillor Lagan. Councillor Mays. Councillor Nunn. Councillor Shaughnessy. Councillor Siddle. Councillor Schemes. Councillor Stamp. Councillor Stevens. Councillor Mrs Stilts. Councillor Swain. Councillor Mrs Thompson. Councillor Miss White. Chairman, the results of that vote are 18 for, 1 against and no abstentions. Thank you.
That is therefore carried then. Thank you very much, members. Agenda item 6 is any other items of the business that the chairman of the committee decides are urgent. I have none. Therefore, officers and members, I thank you for your contributions this evening, and I'm going to draw this meeting to a close at 20:45. As it's now closed, members are advised not to enter into any further